This is a brand new 3T Extrema Italia, the latest bike from the company that way back in 2016 pioneered the whole concept of aero gravel with the original and now iconic Exploro. So this bike has been brought bang up to date with a host of changes, which in the video I'll talk you around and of course go for a ride to see how it performs and handles. I've had the bike for a week, so very much a first ride impression. There will be a full review coming soon to the channel. Now, when that original Exploro launched way back in 2016, people laughed at the idea of aerodynamics making any difference on a gravel bike. Well, who's laughing now? We are seeing races like Unbound being ridden at insane speeds, 20 miles per hour average for 200 miles, which blows my mind. And now a massive choice of aero gravel bikes. So 3T were definitely ahead of the time with that original Exploro. And the bike has changed a lot over the years, and that change has been led mostly by ever wider tyres. That's been the big change in the whole gravel category. And these, as you can see, are mountain bike tyres. So the current flagship bike in the company's range, taking over from the Exploro, is the Race Max, which I reviewed when it launched 2 years ago. And where that tops out at a 46mm wide tyre, this new bike goes up to a whopping 57mm, which is wider than nearly all other gravel bikes in the category, as I'll show you later in the video. And it really shows a change in the gravel scene, with riders wanting to run bigger tyres than ever before. I think with this bike we might be reaching the limit, because any wider and you probably do want a mountain bike. This new bike is dominated by the massive down tube. It really is gigantic and gives a very distinctive look to the bike. It's all about maximising aerodynamic performance with the bigger tyres and minimising drag where possible. And while it does look very similar to the current Race Max launched a couple of years ago, apparently, according to 3T, the only thing this bike shares in common is the carbon fibre construction, which is now in Italy. Yes, that's right. For the last 5 years or so, the Italian company has been investing in manufacturing carbon fibre in-house. And that's a really nice thing to hear. I think it's a good thing for companies like 3T to bring manufacturing back in-house, to have more control and have that real USP of purchase over other brands. And hopefully we might see other brands follow in the footsteps of 3T. So the frame is dominated by this massive down tube, which is narrow around the head tube and then widens around the bottle cages to try and massage air around the bottles and the rear tyre to make it a faster, less draggy bike. 3T doesn't offer any aerodynamic data on how the bike performs in a wind tunnel or compared to its predecessor, so I have to take the word for it that it is a fast bike and the aerodynamics is actually real and not just there for show. Then up front we have a very narrow head tube and a brand new fork that's very slender with a super low profile crown and some other key features I'll touch on in a moment. But then I'm so glad that 3T have got rid of the ugly cable routing on the old bikes, where it went over the stem and into the top tube. The feature I never really liked. Yes, they may have had the reasons for why they did it, but I'm glad they now have a more conventional internal cable routing system. Well, I say cables, actually no cables because it's SRAM wireless, but at brake hoses you can just see underneath the stem and then into the frame via the headset bearing. So much more in common with how other manufacturers are doing it. We have their own carbon fibre aero gravel handlebar and our own stem as well, two-piece, so you can customise the fit in terms of stem length and handlebar width as you need, and there are a few spaces to adjust the stack height on the bike too. Moving to the back of the frame, and here it's been built to offer more compliance and more comfort than the Race Max. So firstly we have a round seat post, so you can fit a 27.2mm carbon seat post, suspension seat post, or a dropper seat post for more extreme terrain as I have here, with an internal seat clamp there. And the whole seat tube layout has been optimised to offer a bit more comfort where possible. The stiffness from the head tube and the bottom bracket, which incorporates a thread fit system, is the same as the Race Max, so the same torsional stiffness when you're sprinting and throwing the bike through the corners, but more compliance from the seat tube and the rear stays than that bike. Now let's talk tyre clearance, because that's one of the big drivers behind the new bike and the changes present on it. Now, if you want to tackle tough terrain and have some decent comfort, you need bigger tyres. And 3T says the brief behind the bike was to deliver the traction of a mountain bike with the fit of a road bike. And to illustrate the evolution of gravel bike tyre size over the last few years, back in 2016, when the Exploro came out, a 35 to 38 was considered wide. But now here we are in 2023 with a bike that takes up to a 57mm wide tyre. And there's probably even space for a wider tyre if you are happy to compromise clearance, because 3T says there is 6mm of clearance between the rubber and the frame and fork. Now, to put that tyre clearance in context against some rivals, a Specialized Diverge goes up to 47, a Canyon Grizzle goes up to 50, my Fairlight Sacan goes up to 50 as well, I think, off the top of my head, and then a Giant Revolt is up to 53. So you can see, compared to those rivals, the 3T Extrema Italia definitely boasts massive tyre clearance. And when talking about tyre clearance, it's a slightly tricky topic sometimes, because what the tyre width says on the sidewall isn't always actually a tyre width you get when fitted to different rims. So a few years ago, 3T developed a really clever smart system called WAM and RAM, which is basically the actual width and diameter of a tyre when fitted to a rim. The idea is to make it easier for us consumers and for designers to specify a tyre and not have any issues where you might fit a tyre that should fit, but due to the rim width doesn't actually fit. And it's a really sensible system, but it really hasn't caught on in the way I thought and hoped it would do when they introduced it a few years ago. And that's because it's definitely one of the more sensible ideas the bike industry has given us in recent years. Right, let's talk equipment and what the new bike will cost you to buy if you like the look of it. And then we'll go for a ride and see how it performs and handles. Now, it's worth remembering that the frame is made in Italy, which will mean a higher cost than a frame made in the Far East, so bear that in mind with the prices. There are 3 builds to choose from, of which this is the most affordable, the cheapest option, and it retails for £6,700. And as you can see, we have a SRAM rival front end, so shifters and single chainring at the front, and a brand new Eagle transmission GX level rear mech, and a massive 1052 cassette, what SRAM likes to call a mullet setup. Party at the back and business at the front. And what that actually means is a massive range of gears getting up the steepest, most extreme climbs you might find when riding this bike. And the rear mech hides the battery really neatly inside the mechanism, so it's well protected from damage. So I really like that. It's not exposed on the back of the rear mech at all. Then we have a pair of Zip 303S carbon wheels, Continental Race King mountain bike tyres, and then a wireless RockShox reverb dropper seat post and a Cell San Marco saddle. And all that equipment on this frame with no pedals weighs 9.6 kilograms. You can also buy the frame on its own and build up any parts you want yourself, and that retails for £4,600. So now you know everything there is to know about the new Extrema Italia. Let me tell you how it rides. And the bike arrived last week, so I've had a few days to ride it and really get to know the bike fairly well on some local trails and over in the Forest of Dean, where I like to go for a day's gravel exploring and adventuring. There will be a more in-depth review in the future, so just first impressions give you a taste of what the bike is like to ride. Speed is clearly still everything with the new bike, but it now comes with a lot more grip from a fat mountain bike tyres, which is handy given how muddy the trails are at the time of testing the bike. The bigger tyres really suit the bike well and remove the limitations of narrow gravel tyres for exploring forest tracks and more demanding single track trails like I'm riding here. One area of disappointment with the Race Max was comfort. The new bike is a big improvement. It offers a far higher level of smoothness and comfort on rough trails, and more composed when skidding and sliding over rocks and roots. But that said, I don't think the smoothest gravel bike in the world. The Giant Revolt, Billet Adler and Specialized Diverge would definitely give it a run for its money when it comes to outright comfort. The fit is a bit higher, shorter and more relaxed than a Race Max, still racy but not quite as extreme, and comfort on the long rides I did was very good. The geometry still provides a lively and reactive experience on the trail. 3T hasn't given the bike the full mountain bike makeover, stopping short of making it as slack as outliers like the BMC Ers or Merida Silex. This shows on very steep and technical sections where its composure is less convincing than the rival bikes, but generally it does manage to hold it all together when you're fighting for grip and control. I'm perhaps a little bit disappointed the geometry isn't more suited to extreme riding the bike is claimed to be designed for. The head angle is in the middle of the road at 71.5 degrees, the same as the Canyon Grail, but not as slack as more progressive bikes like the Merida Silex or BMC Ers, which are in the 69-degree ballpark. So I do feel 3T could have been bolder with the geometry to really take the capability of the bike to another level. Clearly the new 3T Extrema Italia is still a speed-focused bike at heart, but one that now won't hold you back or beat you up when the trail becomes extreme. So yes, the bike does live up to its name. Now a few notes on the equipment choices so far. I've ridden the Eagle transmission on a few mountain bikes. This is my first experience on a gravel bike, and it works in an interesting way. The rear mech waits for the cassette to be at a certain rotation before the chain moves across to give more reliable shifting under load. Where on a mountain bike it's a bit slow, on this bike it's really fast and slick, probably because of high speeds and high cadence involved on a bike like this. So shifting in the mud has been excellent, doesn't miss a beat at all, it's super quiet and super reliable. I've had no issues with it at all, and the range is fantastic when you are gravelling up some very, very steep climbs. 3T's own Aero gravel handlebar is a really satisfying shape. It's Aero on the tops, does make fitting a computer mount a bit more tricky because not much round diameter to fit the clamp onto, a nice shape when you're cruising along on the tops. And then the drops are flared while the hoods are relatively upright, and when you're in the drops riding over rough terrain, there's quite a bit of noticeable compliance for handlebars moving around, so a bit of extra comfort when you are riding in the drops. And then we have the reverb dropper seat post, which is activated by pressing both buttons together to drop the seat post, and gives a useful amount of extra clearance when you are navigating very steep, tricky terrain where saddle can be kind of really jarring you in the backside, and that helps you get down those descents a bit more easily. And then the use of mountain bike tyres is a no-brainer when riding in mud, and give way more traction and way more control than any of the best gravel tyres I have tried. It's not just the extra width of the tyre, but the actual tread pattern as well, enough depth between the blocks and the angular shape that gives excellent traction when accelerating, braking and cornering. Not my first experience of mountain bike tyres on a gravel bike. I put some on my Fairlight Sacan last year and it worked really well. And of course I rode the 3T Ultra last year with smaller 650B wheels and tyres, and that worked well too. So clearly, based on my riding, this new Extrema Italia is a bike that lives up to its name. It's an extremely fast bike and a bike that's more at home on extreme terrain than the Race Max I reviewed 2 years ago. But I'll keep riding the bike over the next few weeks on hopefully some more extreme terrain to see how it really copes with some extreme riding. And hopefully you found this review extremely useful, and if you did, you hit that subscribe button down there. It would be extremely appreciated. Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all again very soon.